The night I found my daughter, the snow was falling in silence, the kind of silence that feels like it's listening. Her hands were blue, her breath a ghost in the cold. Behind that closed door I could hear laughter. Crystal glasses clinking, firewood cracking. Music playing like the world hadn't just abandoned someone outside. I stood there for a second, frozen between rage and heartbreak. The mother shouldn't have to beg for her child's warmth. Not on Christmas. Not ever. And that was the night I learned sometimes the people who preach family the loudest are the ones who know nothing about love. If stories like this move you, if you believe quiet justice still matters, hit subscribe, leave a comment, and share this with someone who still believes in the warmth of a mother's love. Let's begin. Snow was falling hard that night, thick, heavy flakes that swallowed every sound. The wind cut straight through my coat as I stepped out of the cab, suitcase dragging behind me. I hadn't told anyone I was coming home early. After months away in Portland, all I wanted was to surprise my daughter, maybe sit by her fire, drink cocoa, laugh like we used to. But as I reached the porch I froze. There on the steps sat Nora. My Nora. She was curled into herself like a child, barefoot, her blouse soaked, hair frozen to her face. For a second I couldn't even move. I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. The porch light flickered, the wind howled, and I swear the snow was falling faster. Like the world wanted to bury that moment. Behind her, through the window, came laughter. Warm, rich, careless laughter. The family gathered around a fire, glasses clinking, music playing, jingle bells of all songs. My heart clenched so hard I could hear it over the wind. Nora? I whispered, my voice trembling. She didn't answer. Her lips were blue, her body shaking uncontrollably. I dropped my bags, ran to her, yanked off my coat, and wrapped it around her shoulders. Her skin felt like glass. Sweetheart, it's me. It's Mom, I said, brushing her wet hair from her face. Her eyes fluttered open for just a second, confused, distant. Mom, she breathed, barely a sound. I pulled her close. I thought I raised you to fight the cold, I murmured, my voice breaking, not to be left in it. She leaned into my chest and for a moment I could feel her heart, faint but still there. Still fighting. Behind us the door stayed shut. Inside they laughed louder, someone shouted cheers. And another song started playing. I looked at the golden light spilling through the window and wanted to scream. How could they? How could anyone sit by a fire while my child froze outside? The gust of wind slammed against the house, and the snow whipped around us. I tightened my arms around Nora, trying to block it out. My hands shook, not from the cold but from rage. Hang on, baby, I whispered. Hang on. The wind held again and suddenly I was back in time. Nora was 7, lying in bed with a fever, her tiny body burning up. I remembered sitting by her all night, pressing a cold cloth to her forehead, whispering lullabies while the storm raged outside. She'd opened her eyes back then, too weak but smiling, and said, "You're my warm blanket, Mama." I blinked, and the memory faded into the snow. Only this time I was the one trying to be her blanket again, but the world had turned crueler. "Stay with me, Nora," I pleaded. "You hear me? Stay with me." Her head fell against my shoulder. The sound of laughter inside grew muffled as the wind roared. I could smell the smoke from their fireplace, sweet and sharp, mixing with the scent of her frozen hair. My knees hit the porch as I cradled her tighter. I wanted to kick that door down, drag her inside, make them look at what they'd done. But right then all I could do was hold her and pray. Her fingers twitched against mine, barely there. "It's okay," I whispered, pressing my forehead to hers. "Mom's here now. You're safe." Another flash of memory hit me. Nora running down the dojo mat when she was 10, shouting, "Look, Mom, I can block now." Her small hands balled into fists, her smile pure light. I told her, "Remember, strength isn't in your hands. It's in your heart." Now I wondered if I'd ever believed that more than I did at this moment. The light from the window glowed across her face, soft and golden, and I realized how wrong it looked, warmth belonging to people who didn't deserve it. I turned toward that light, teeth clenched, eyes burning. Inside they toasted again. Another round of laughter. I felt something rise in me. Something old, steady, unbreakable. Not this Christmas. I stood, lifting Nora in my arms, her body light as snow, and turned my back to that glowing house. The wind screamed, but I didn't. I just walked, each step crunching in the ice, each breath a vow. Not this Christmas. The airport was quieter than I remembered. Just the squeak of suitcase wheels and the hum of heaters trying to fight the cold. My old leather bag looked out of place among all the shiny luggage around me, but I'd had it for 20 years, long enough to know it carried more stories than clothes. As I walked toward the exit, snowflakes danced through the automatic doors, swirling like little ghosts that had followed me from Portland. For 20 years I taught kids how to defend themselves, I thought. But I never taught my own daughter how to defend her heart. The words hit me harder than the wind outside. The taxi line was short. The driver was a young man with sleepy eyes and a thick jacket zipped to his chin. "Where to, ma'am?" he asked. "Meadow Creek," I said, watching his eyebrows lift. "That's way out in the suburbs." I nodded. "Yeah, that's home." The drive stretched long and white, the city fading behind us until there was nothing but open road and snow. Streetlights blurred like streaks of gold through the frosted window. I rested my head against the glass, letting the hum of the tires fill the silence. On the sidewalks I saw families, arms linked, laughing, dragging trees to their porches. One little girl ran ahead of her dad, waving a candy cane in the air. I smiled, then felt that small sting in my chest, the one that always came when I thought of Nora. It had been months since I'd last seen her. She called less and less after she married Charles. I told myself she was just busy, that she was happy. But every mother knows when something isn't right. The last time we talked, her voice sounded thinner, like someone who'd been whispering for too long. I remember teasing her once, saying, "Don't forget where you came from, kiddo. You may live in a mansion now, but you were raised in a dojo." She laughed, soft, distant, and said, "I know, Mom. I just don't have time to punch air anymore." That was the first time I realized she was slipping away. The driver turned the radio down as if sensing I needed quiet. Outside, snow kept falling, slow, heavy, endless. I watched the world disappear under it and thought about the girl who used to follow me around the training mats, swinging her little fists and yelling higher at the air. The memory flickered. Her at 8 years old, hair tied back, tiny feet planted on the mat. I stood behind her, holding her wrist steady. Never hit in anger, nor, I told her, only in truth. She looked up at me, serious as a soldier, and said, "What's the difference?" "Anger hurts," I said. "Truth protects." The car hit a bump and jolted me back to the present. I glanced at the clock. Almost 10 p.m. Christmas Eve. The snow outside looked like a sheet of glass under the streetlights. "You got family waiting for you?" the driver asked, his voice gentle. I hesitated, watching the reflection of my face in the window. Lines deeper than last year, eyes heavier. "Yeah," I said quietly. "My daughter." He smiled, not catching the weight behind it. "That's nice," he said. "Christmas with family." I turned away, biting the inside of my lip. Family. The word didn't feel warm anymore. It felt fragile, like something that could shatter if I said it too loud. As we turned onto Meadow Creek Road, the houses grew bigger, brighter. String lights sparkled across fences, wreaths on every door. Everything looked perfect, like the world had decided to perform happiness tonight. But even from the cab, I could feel something colder creeping beneath it. I took a deep breath, my fingers tightening on the handle of my suitcase. Almost there, I whispered to myself. In the distance, I saw the faint glow of Nora's house, warm, golden, beautiful. The kind of place I once dreamed she'd have. Yet as the car slowed, a strange feeling spread through me. Like standing in front of a dojo before a fight you don't want but know you have to face. "Here we are," the driver said, turning to me. I smiled politely and handed him a few bills. "Keep the change," I murmured. He nodded, wished me a Merry Christmas, and drove off. The cold hit me like a wall the second I stepped out. Snow crunched under my boots as I stood there staring at the house. My breath came out in clouds, and for a moment I almost turned back. But something deep in my chest, something old, fierce, unbreakable, pushed me forward. I pulled my scarf tighter, whispering to no one. I taught others to fight their fears. Maybe it's time I fight mine. And as I walked through the snow toward that golden light, I didn't know what I was about to find. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't leaving without my daughter. Through the glass, everything looked perfect. The Rutherford house glowed like something out of a Christmas commercial, gold light spilling over velvet curtains. The table dressed in red and gold. Candles flickered beside silver trays stacked with roasted turkey, mashed potatoes, pies that looked too perfect to eat. I could almost smell the butter and wine from where I stood, shivering on the porch. Inside they were laughing. Real belly-deep laughter. Charles, my son-in-law, was raising a glass, his voice booming over the music. His mother, Evelyn, was beside him, her pearls catching the light like they belonged there more than she did. Everyone around that table looked full, warm, content. And my daughter wasn't there. I pressed a hand to the glass, the cold biting into my palm. From the outside, their world looked flawless. Inside, it was built on cruelty. Let her stay outside, I heard someone say, one of the daughters-in-law, maybe Abigail. Her tone was sharp, too loud, the kind people use when they want to be overheard. Maybe the cold will finally teach her some gratitude. The others laughed. Not cruelly at first. More like they were trying to turn it into a joke, but that was the worst part. They thought it was funny. Something inside me twisted. I could feel the blood rush to my ears, heat rising against the freezing air. I looked at that perfect table, at those wine glasses clinking in cheer, and my breath came out as smoke. I whispered, almost without realizing it, "You're laughing with fire while my child's turning to ice." My voice fogged the glass for a moment, and behind that fog I saw reflections, mine and theirs, two worlds pressed against each other, divided by a sheet of silence and hypocrisy. They didn't see me, or maybe they did and just didn't care. Evelyn leaned back in her chair, smiling in that effortless way of people who've never known hunger, fear, or shame. She poured another drink, her hand steady. "Poor Nora," she said with a sigh that wasn't pity. It was exhaustion. Always so dramatic. Sometimes you have to let people hit rock bottom before they learn. Hit rock bottom? My daughter was sitting outside in the snow, barefoot, freezing, while they feasted inches away. The room erupted in laughter again. Glasses raised high, music swelling behind them. It was Jingle Bells again, cheerful, relentless. I could see the fire crackling in the hearth, throwing orange light across their faces. The kids tearing into wrapping paper, their parents smiling like it was the best night of the year. I looked down at the porch where Nora had been just moments ago, where I'd wrapped her in my coat and carried her to the car. Her footprints were still there, half buried now by falling snow, tiny, trembling, fading. I pressed my forehead against the cold window. Inside, the wine shimmered ruby red under the lights. It reminded me too much of blood. I thought of the little girl who once used to beg me to tell her bedtime stories by the window, who would fall asleep in my lap with the world safe outside. I thought of how I'd promised her she'd always have a home, always have warmth, and now the warmth was locked behind glass. My breath fogged up the window again. I could almost imagine the glass breaking, shards flying, the laughter stopping, every eye turning to the doorway to finally see the woman standing in the cold. But I didn't move. I couldn't. Years of teaching self-control had built a wall inside me. My fists itched, my jaw tightened, but I just stood there, the wind biting at my neck, my body shaking. Not from cold anymore, but from the kind of anger that feels holy. I stepped back from the glass and looked at that house, that glow, that fire. They called it family, but all I saw was rot wrapped in ribbon. For a moment I closed my eyes and listened. To the laughter, to the wind, to the quiet sob my heart made. And in that silence I promised myself something. This warmth they've stolen, this dignity they've mocked, I will take it back. The snow kept falling, heavy and endless, but I stood there long enough for the cold to sting my cheeks, to remind me I was still alive, still fighting. Then I turned away from the window. The laughter faded behind me, but its echo stayed. "Laugh while you can," I whispered into the storm. "Because this mother's not done." I carried Nora in my arms like she was a child again, her head resting against my shoulder, her breath shallow but still there. The snow crunched under my boots, and every step felt heavier than the last. The warmth from the house hit me even before I reached the door. Heat that didn't belong to us anymore. I kicked the doormat aside and pounded on the door with my fist. Once, twice. The laughter inside stuttered, then stopped. I could hear muffled whispers, someone moving toward the entrance. When the door finally opened, Mrs. Rutherford stood there in a silk dress, her pearls gleaming under the chandelier. She smiled, a slow, practiced, poisonous kind of smile. She wanted air, she said, voice dripping with fake calm. We gave her plenty. I looked at her, really looked at her. The red wine in her hand, the firelight behind her. The way her expression said, "You don't belong here." My jaw tightened. "She's freezing," I said. "You call this plenty?" Charles appeared behind her, sleeves rolled up, tie loose. His face was cold, not a trace of guilt. "She's unstable, Lydia," he said flatly. "It's better she learns some discipline." For a moment I couldn't breathe. The sound of the wind outside vanished. The ticking clock inside grew deafening. I looked down at Nora, my baby shaking in my arms, and then back at them. "Discipline?" I repeated quietly. "Then watch discipline, Mr. Rutherford." I stepped inside, my boots leaving wet prints on their perfect wooden floor. I set Nora gently on the nearest chair, turned toward the wall, and with one swift motion slammed my fist against the light switch. The music stopped mid-beat. The chandelier went dark. The room froze in silence. Only the fire crackled now, the light flickering across their stunned faces. Their perfect dinner shimmered in half-shadow. Mrs. Rutherford gasped, clutching her pearls as if I'd struck her instead of a wall. I took a deep breath. "You call it tradition," I said, my voice steady but low. "I call it cruelty." The words hung there, heavier than the snow outside. I walked closer to the fire, feeling the warmth on my hands, watching the orange glow lick across the logs. The flames reflected in my eyes, and I knew I must have looked like something they'd never seen before. Not the quiet woman who sent birthday cards and smiled at holidays, but the one who raised a daughter on her own, who taught kids to stand up and strike when they had to. Charles opened his mouth, maybe to defend himself, maybe to lie again, but I cut him off. "Do you even hear yourselves?" I said. "You sit here drinking wine while she nearly freezes to death outside your door. You talk about her like she's broken. You talk about discipline while you burn with comfort." No one spoke. The only sound was the soft hiss of the fire, the faint drip of melted snow from my coat hitting their polished floor. Mrs. Rutherford took a step back, muttering something about boundaries and private matters. I turned my head slowly, meeting her eyes. "Boundaries end," I said, "where abuse begins." For a split second I thought she might slap me, but she didn't. Instead she glanced away, pretending to straighten a napkin, pretending not to shake. Charles crossed his arms. "You said your piece," he said coldly. "You should leave before you embarrass yourself further." I laughed, a sound that surprised even me. "Embarrass myself?" I said softly. "No, Charles. I think I've finally stopped being embarrassed." I bent down, wrapped my coat tighter around Nora, and whispered, "We're leaving, sweetheart." Her eyes fluttered open, dazed but aware. I brushed her hair back, my voice low. "You're safe now." When I stood up, I looked around the room one last time. The smell of roasted turkey and wine filled the air, but it couldn't cover the stench of something rotten. Something moral, something human. I walked toward the door, then paused. The firelight danced across the wall, catching my reflection in one of their picture frames. For the first time, I saw not the tired widow or the quiet teacher, but a woman who had drawn her own line in the snow. I turned slightly and said, "You think you've won because you have warmth and walls. but the cold always remembers who shut the door. And with that I opened the door wide. The wind held through, scattering napkins and smoke, snuffing the fake warmth right out of their perfect house. The snow hit my face sharp and clean. I carried my daughter back into the storm, the light of their fire fading behind us, just another lie swallowed by the dark. The cold bit through my sleeves as I carried Nora to the car. Her lips were pale, her breath shallow. I wrapped every blanket I could find around her and fumbled for my phone with shaking fingers. 911, I said into the wind. It's my daughter. She's freezing. Please send someone now. The dispatcher's voice was calm, practiced. Help is on the way, ma'am. Stay with her. Keep her warm. I held Nora close, whispering, you hear that, baby? Help's coming. Just hang on. My breath fogged the windshield as I tried to rub some life into her hands. The sirens came faster than I expected, bright red and blue lights cutting through the white of the snow. The door opened and a young officer stepped out. For a second I didn't recognize him, taller now, shoulders broader. But then he took off his cap and it hit me. Officer Malik? I asked. He blinked. Then his face broke into a mix of shock and concern. Sensei Lydia? I nodded, barely able to speak. He knelt beside the car, checking Nora's pulse, wrapping his jacket around her shoulders. God, he whispered, I remember you teaching me to break boards, but I never thought I'd see you like this. His eyes lifted to the house, the warm glow behind frosted glass, the silhouettes of people moving but not helping. They left her out here? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Malik stood, jaw tight. He pulled out his radio. Dispatch. Confirm neglect and possible endangerment. I need backup and medical support at 45 Meadow Creek. Then he turned to me. Ma'am, I'll stand with you. Something in my chest cracked open. Not from pain this time, from relief. From knowing someone saw it, someone believed it. By now, a few neighbors had stepped out onto their porches, drawn by the sirens and flashing lights. One of them, a teenage boy, held up his phone recording. Others followed. I saw the red glow flicker across their faces, the reflection of justice in motion. One woman whispered, that's Mrs. Rutherford's house. What happened? I straightened my back, brushing the snow from my coat. Record, I said, my voice steady, cutting through the night. Record, not for me, but for every mother who'll be told to stay quiet. Malik looked at me, eyes glinting with pride, then turned toward the house. He walked up the steps, knocked once and waited. When the door opened, the Rutherford stood there, pale against the light. Evening, Malik said, his tone clipped but controlled. You'll want to stay inside. This is now a police matter. Evelyn Rutherford opened her mouth to argue, but then she caught sight of the phones, neighbors, strangers, all capturing the scene. Her lips trembled. She closed the door slowly, as if trying to erase the image that would already live online by morning. I stood there, the sirens still echoing faintly, their red and blue lights painting streaks across my face and the snow around us. Malik guided the medics as they loaded Nora into the ambulance. Her fingers twitched weakly when I squeezed her hand, and that tiny motion felt like a victory. As the ambulance doors shut, Malik turned back to me. You did the right thing, he said. I looked toward the house, where the curtains had just been drawn tight. The warm light inside flickered against the glass, uneasy now, like fire starting to fear its own reflection. No, I said softly. We did. The snow kept falling, quiet and endless, but for the first time that night it didn't feel like silence, it felt like proof. The courtroom smelled like coffee and polished wood, but it might as well have been ice. Everything in there felt cold. The marble floors, the judge's face, even the air between the benches. I sat beside Nora, her hands trembling inside mine. She hadn't said a word all morning. Her eyes were fixed on the floor, like she already knew how this would end. Across the room sat the Rutherfords, perfectly composed, their lawyer crisp and confident. You could tell he was used to winning. His cufflinks sparkled under the fluorescent light every time he moved his hands, And when he smiled, it wasn't at anyone. It was at power. He stood adjusting his tie. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, "Mrs. Grant is dramatizing. There was no physical harm, no evidence of assault. At best, it's a family misunderstanding magnified by emotion." The low murmur rippled through the crowd. I felt something twist deep inside me, something old and hot. The same feeling I used to get when I saw one of my students being bullied. Only this time it wasn't a child I was protecting. It was my own. I rose from my seat before my lawyer could stop me. "Emotional harm," I said, my voice shaking but clear, "is a wound that doesn't heal." The room went still. The judge's gavel hit once, a warning, but I didn't sit down. I looked straight at that lawyer, at his polished shoes and his polished lies. "You talk about physical harm like it's the only kind that matters. Tell me, counselor, have you ever watched your child stop believing she deserves to be loved?" He didn't answer. He just clicked his pen. I turned to the judge. "My daughter didn't just lose warmth that night," I said. "She lost herself." The judge didn't meet my eyes. His gaze shifted to the paperwork on his desk. Lines of ink that would soon decide what pain counted and what didn't. Behind me, someone coughed. The courtroom air thickened with the quiet of people who wanted to believe justice still worked. I looked at Nora, sitting small beside me, her head bowed. For a moment I saw her as a little girl again. Her hair in pigtails, swinging her tiny fists at the air in our old dojo, laughing, shouting, "Hiya!" Her joy back then could have lit up the whole room. But now, in this one, even the light felt dim. My voice cracked. "Do you know what it's like," I said softly, "to knock on your child's door and realize she's too afraid to open it? To hold her hand and feel nothing but the echo of who she used to be?" The lawyer sighed. "With all due respect, Your Honor, we can't run a case on feelings." I wanted to laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was the kind of cruelty so polished it pretended to be reason. Then, as if the world wanted to remind me why I was here, a snowflake drifted past the tall courtroom window, the first of the season. My breath caught. Nora's eyes lifted, following it. And suddenly the memory came back like a knife. That night, her body trembling in my arms, her lips whispering my name through chattering teeth. The snow melting on her skin. Her hospital room the next day, quiet but heavy. She sat by the window wrapped in a blanket, watching the same kind of snow fall, slow, soft, merciless. I brought her tea. She hadn't drunk it. She just whispered, "Mom, I keep hearing them laugh." The sound of that laugh haunted every silence after. Back in the courtroom, the judge finally spoke. His tone was dry, practiced, like a man who'd said these words too many times. "The court finds insufficient evidence to classify this as abuse." It felt like someone had opened a window and let the cold straight into my chest. I gripped the edge of the table to keep from falling. Nora stared ahead, blank, her face drained of color. I reached for her hand, but she didn't move. The lawyer smiled faintly, the victory smile, rehearsed and hollow. Mrs. Rutherford dabbed the corner of her eye with a tissue, pretending to be the victim. My lawyer whispered, "Lydia, please don't say anything." But I couldn't stop myself. My voice came out quieter than I expected, but it carried through the silence. "Then the law," I said, "is colder than the snow." No one breathed. The judge hesitated for half a second, maybe ashamed, maybe not. Then he slammed his gavel again. "Case closed." The sound echoed like thunder, but to me it was just another door slamming shut. Reporters outside would later say I looked calm, dignified. But they didn't see my hands trembling under the table, or the way Nora's eyes glazed over when we stood to leave. As we walked past the Rutherfords, Mrs. Rutherford avoided my gaze, but Charles didn't. He leaned closer, voice low. "You should have stayed quiet," he whispered. I stopped walking. My reflection stared back at me from the polished courtroom floor. An old woman, tired but still standing. I turned to him and said, "You should have known what silence costs." He blinked, startled, and for the first time I saw it, fear. Just a flicker, but enough. We walked out into the hallway. where the winter light spilled through the glass doors. Outside, snow was falling again, soft and relentless. I looked up at it, and for a moment I could almost feel its cold. But then I realized something. The law might have been colder than the snow, but my heart wasn't, and I was nowhere near done fighting. Started with one video, a shaky clip someone took that night. Me carrying Nora through the snow, my coat wrapped around her, sirens flashing red and blue behind us. I didn't even know it existed until a week later, when my phone began to buzz non-stop. First I thought it was spam. Then I saw the title, A Mother Carrying Her Frozen Daughter, Christmas Eve in Boise. My hands went cold. I clicked. There we were. The storm, the ambulance lights, my face half lit by firelight and grief. And above it, a caption that someone had added. This is what love looks like when justice fails. Within hours it spread. Within days the whole world had seen it. Hashtag warmth for Nora started trending. People from everywhere, Mexico, Ghana, Japan, Poland, the Philippines, were sharing it. Mothers everywhere stand with you, one woman wrote. We've all carried our daughters through a storm. Another said, this broke me. No one should ever freeze outside their own home. For the first time in months, the silence around us cracked. News outlets picked it up, not because it was sensational but because people cared. One night as I sat by Nora's bed, scrolling through the messages, I whispered, you see this, sweetheart? You're not alone anymore. She was stronger by then, color back in her cheeks, her hand steady enough to hold a mug of cocoa. She looked at the screen, tears in her eyes, and said softly, they don't even know me. They don't have to, I told her. They know what it means to be human. Someone from a local radio station called for an interview. They asked me, Mrs. Grant, do you feel like you've won? I thought for a moment before answering. No, I said. But I don't feel invisible anymore. The next morning, a headline filled the front page of the Boise Tribune. Rutherford law firm under scrutiny after viral abuse case. The article described investigations, old testimonies, clients coming forward. All the cracks that had been hidden beneath their polished image. The same family that once stood untouchable behind money and power now had reporters outside their gates. News helicopters hovered over their estate. Paparazzi waited by the driveway. Even their neighbors stopped pretending not to see. One photo went viral again. Mr. Rutherford stepping outside, shielding his face as cameras flashed. The caption read, "The cold has come for the Rutherfords." I didn't gloat. I just sat quietly in my kitchen watching it unfold, knowing that life was finally balancing its own scales. Later that week, I received a message from someone named Akiko in Japan. She wrote, "Your story reminded me of my mother. She fought for me when no one else did. You reminded the world that mothers are warriors." I read it 3 times, my throat tight. That night I recorded a short video, nothing fancy, just me at the table with a cup of tea. I said I didn't fight alone. I fought with a million hearts beating beside mine. Every mother who watched, every stranger who spoke up. You turned my pain into a chorus of strength. You didn't just warm my daughter. You warmed the world a little too. When I posted it, I didn't expect much. But the comments poured in. Not pity, not outrage, but something deeper. Connection. People shared photos of their mothers, their daughters, their small acts of kindness. A woman in South Africa donated blankets to a shelter in Nora's name. A father in Canada wrote, "You made me call my mom tonight. Thank you." And for the first time since that awful night, I felt peace. Real peace. The kind that comes not from winning a battle, but from knowing the truth finally reached beyond the courtroom walls. Nora started painting again. One morning she showed me a small canvas, a pair of hands holding a snowflake that glowed like fire. "It's called warmth," she said, smiling shyly. I hung it by the window, where the sunlight hits it every morning. The world hadn't changed overnight, but something inside it had. Somewhere in the noise of news and hashtags and opinions, there was still a heartbeat, steady, human, unstoppable. I looked out at the falling snow that day and whispered, "You see that, Nora? It doesn't matter how cold the world gets. There's always someone out there keeping the fire alive. And for the first time in a long time she smiled, a real one. Because this time the world was watching. And it finally cared. The apartment was small, barely big enough for 2 people and a few memories. But it was warm. The kind of warmth that didn't come from a thermostat, but from knowing no one could take it away this time. The lamps cast a soft yellow glow on the peeling wallpaper. And for the first time in months, the silence wasn't heavy, it was peaceful. Nora was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, her hair tied in a messy bun. The smell of burnt sugar filled the air. "Mom," she called, half laughing, half panicking. "I think I murdered the cookies again." I looked up from the couch where I was mending an old scarf and smiled. "It's fine," I said. "Burnt means flavor." She laughed, that rare laugh I hadn't heard since before the hospital. Small at first, then full and light. She opened the oven, fanned the smoke with a towel, and turned toward me, cheeks flushed pink from the heat. "I don't know why you let me near your kitchen." "Because it's our kitchen now," I said. "And because every warrior needs a few scars." She rolled her eyes, but I saw the flicker of pride in them. There it was, that same spark she had as a little girl. The one that used to shine when she'd break a board at the dojo or run to me with scraped knees saying, "I didn't cry this time." These days she didn't talk much about what happened. And I didn't ask. Peeling isn't loud, it's quiet. Like learning how to breathe again without flinching. I watched her pour tea into mismatched cups, her hands steady now. The tremors were gone. She'd started writing again too. Short lines on little slips of paper she kept in a jar by the window. Once I peeked at one when she wasn't looking. It said, "The cold didn't break me. It just showed me where the warmth was hiding." She caught me reading it and pretended to be annoyed. But later that night she left another one on my bedside table. "Thank you for not giving up on me." A few days later there was a knock at the door. Nora looked up, startled. I opened it and there he was, Malik in his off-duty jacket, holding a small paper bag and wearing that sheepish grin only good men have. "Didn't want to show up empty-handed," he said, handing it to Nora. Inside was a thin silver bracelet, simple but beautiful. On the inside were 2 small words engraved in clean, careful letters, "Stand tall." Nora traced the letters with her finger, eyes glistening. "It's perfect," she whispered. Malik smiled, a little nervous. "It's just a reminder," he said softly. "You already know how." I felt my throat tighten. There was something so pure about that moment. No grand speeches, no heroic music. Just quiet respect. After he left, Nora sat on the couch, turning the bracelet around her wrist. "Do you think I'll ever be the same?" she asked. I walked over, kneeling beside her, taking her hand. "No," I said honestly. "You'll be better. You'll be you without the weight they tried to put on you." She nodded slowly, looking down at her wrist, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the city outside, cars, wind, life going on. I stood stretching my back and chuckled. "You know, when you were little, you used to punch the air like you were fighting invisible dragons." She grinned. "I remember. You said I had terrible form." "I lied," I said, smiling. "You were perfect." A faint light filled the room, snow reflecting off the street lamps outside. I reached for a framed photo on the shelf. The 2 of us in our old karate uniforms. Nora was maybe 7, missing a front tooth. Her tiny fists raised like she was ready to take on the world. "You asked me once what strength meant," I said, looking at the photo. "And I told you strength isn't fists. It's faith. You don't win by hitting harder. You win by refusing to stay down." She leaned her head against my shoulder. "Guess I'm still learning that." "That's all I ever wanted," I said softly. "For you to stand." Outside, the snow began to melt, sliding off rooftops and dripping down gutters. Quiet proof that winter was breaking. I watched it fall, felt the air shift, lighter, softer. Nora got up, slipped the bracelet onto her wrist, and went back to the kitchen. "Okay," she said, tying her apron again. "One more batch. And this time they're not burning." I laughed. "That's my girl." As the smell of sugar and vanilla filled the room again, I realized something. The world hadn't given us peace. We'd built it, one breath, one scar, one laugh at a time. And as Nora hummed softly to herself, I whispered a prayer I hadn't said in years. Thank you for the warmth. It had been a year since that night, the longest winter of our lives. The city had thawed, the snow long gone, but that kind of cold doesn't just disappear. It lingers somewhere inside you, quiet and patient. Still, that morning as I walked downtown, I realized something had shifted. The air felt lighter, brighter. Even the wind didn't bite the same way. I stopped at a crosswalk and there it was, the old Rutherford building. Their name used to hang proud in gold letters across the glass. Now the sign was gone, and taped to the locked front door was a plain white paper. Office closed, under investigation. For a long moment I just stood there. The streets were quiet, but I could hear everything. The faint hum of the city, the rhythm of footsteps, the breath of a world that had finally turned. A year ago that same glass reflected power. Now it reflected me. I walked closer, close enough to see my reflection in the window. An older woman, yes, lines deeper, hair grayer, but standing straight, steady, unbroken. Behind the glass, the once bustling office was empty. Desk stripped bare. Phones silent. The echo of arrogance gone. They took her peace, I whispered, my voice soft against the wind. But I took back her freedom. For a second I saw it, my own reflection overlapping with theirs. The ghost of a victory not shouted, not celebrated, just earned. I didn't smile, not exactly. But there was a calm in my chest, the kind that only comes when justice finally breathes. The wind picked up, tugging at my coat, sending my scarf dancing behind me. The snow, what little was left, melted into tiny rivers along the curb. The sun caught the water and for the first time it felt warm. In the reflection my face looked different. Not hard, not angry, just alive. The light hit the glass, splitting across it like a promise kept. I closed my eyes for a second, letting the moment sink in. The world around me kept moving, cars passing, conversations drifting. But it all felt far away. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about release. I turned, walking toward the park where Nora waited. She'd started teaching yoga there on weekends. Small classes, just neighbors and a few friends. It wasn't about money. It was about breathing again. About remembering what it feels like to move freely. From a distance I saw her. Mat rolled out, hair pulled back, sunlight glinting off the silver bracelet on her wrist. The one Malik gave her. Stand tall. She moved with a quiet grace, her breath syncing with the soft music playing from a small speaker. The melody was gentle. A single piano, low and steady. For a moment I just watched. Every inhale, every stretch was a kind of poetry. Proof that the girl who once trembled in the cold had learned to stand in her own light. I sat on a bench nearby, my heart calm, my body still. I didn't need to say anything. I didn't need to fix anything. The world had already done its part. The breeze carried the faint sound of her breath, strong, rhythmic, peaceful. Somewhere between those exhalations I realized I was breathing differently too. Not holding, not bracing, just living. The group of kids ran past, their laughter echoing down the path. The smell of roasted coffee drifted from a cart nearby. Life in all its simple noise surrounded us again. I looked back once more at the direction of the Rutherford building, barely visible now between the trees. The sign still hung crooked, the words under investigation flapping in the wind like an afterthought. It didn't matter anymore. The story was done. I took one deep breath, letting the sound of the piano blend with Nora's steady rhythm. Her breathing and my heartbeat, two different songs finding the same tempo. In the distance, the light caught the glass of a nearby building, scattering gold across the snowmelt. I smiled to myself, whispering the fire never died, just waited for spring. And when Nora looked up, meeting my eyes across the park, she smiled too, soft, knowing, free. The wind lifted again, cool but gentle this time, carrying away the last chill of that long, cruel winter. The storm had ended, and in its place warmth had returned, not loud, not blazing, just steady enough to last a lifetime. The class wasn't big. Just a dozen women in an old community center with creaky floors and sun-faded mats, but it was full of life. Every Thursday afternoon, we'd push the tables to the side, roll up the curtains, and open the windows so the spring air could flow in. It smelled like new beginnings, cherry blossoms, soap, and hope. I started calling it the quiet strength circle. It wasn't about throwing punches, it was about reclaiming space, the kind of space that fear once took away. "All right," I said to the group, raising my hands gently, "we don't fight anger with anger. We fight it with awareness." The women nodded. Some were shy, some still flinched at loud sounds, some hadn't smiled in months. But every week, I watched their backs straighten, their voices grow steadier. Nora sat in the corner, leading a breathing session, her voice soft and calm. She'd found her rhythm again. Teaching meditation, helping survivors cook healthy meals in the small kitchen next door. The way she moved now was light, like she'd left the winter behind for good. One afternoon as class ended, Malik walked in, holding a folded newspaper. His grin was wide, the kind that reached his eyes. "You two made the news again," he said, handing it to me. On the front page was a headline: "Local program empowers women to rise again." Below it, a smaller line: "2 new cases filed after watching Mrs. Grant's story online." I read it twice, my chest tightening in a way that wasn't pain, just gratitude. Malik smiled. "Looks like your fire's spreading, Sensei." Nora laughed. "Careful," she said, "Mom's gonna start a movement." I shook my head. "No," I said quietly, "just lighting candles where it's dark." For a moment the room fell into that comfortable silence, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. Outside, petals drifted past the window, catching the light as they fell. I walked to the door, opened it wide, and let the breeze flow through the room. In that moment I remembered every step that brought us here. The cold nights, the courtroom, the sirens, the silence, and how somehow we turned all of it into something that could help someone else. Nora came to stand beside me. "You ever think about that night?" she asked softly. "Every day," I said. "But it doesn't hurt the same way anymore." We stood there watching the women chat, their laughter rising and fading like music. Some stayed to clean the mats, others lingered to talk. No one was in a rush to leave. Malik leaned against the doorway. "You've done good, Lydia." I smiled. We did good. Later that evening, when everyone had gone, I locked up the center and slipped the newspaper into my bag. Nora linked her arm through mine as we walked home. The street was lined with cherry blossoms in full bloom, soft pink clouds above our heads. The petals fell like snow, but this time the world wasn't cold. We walked slowly, neither of us saying much, just breathing, just living. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang, mingling with the sound of laughter from a nearby cafe. Nora squeezed my hand and said, "You know, you were right all along. Strength is in fists." I smiled. "No," I said, "it's faith. And you've got plenty of that." She laughed, her eyes reflecting the warm evening light. For a second, she looked just like the little girl who used to shadow my karate moves in the living room, her tiny hands mimicking every punch. We stopped under a cherry tree heavy with blossoms. I brushed one petal from her hair and said quietly, "The law can fail. The world can turn cold. But the warmth we give, that's justice of the heart." Nora nodded, her smile soft. "Then we'll just keep giving it." The sun dipped lower, painting everything gold. The petals swirled around us like confetti. Not an ending, but a beginning. When we reached the park, she pulled out her phone, snapping a photo of the trees. "You should post this," she said. "People need to see it." So I did. I wrote, "Where are you watching from? Tell me your story. Mothers everywhere deserve justice." Then I hit post and slipped the phone back into my pocket. We stood there a while longer side by side, watching the petals drift across the street. Little reminders that even after the harshest winter, spring always finds its way back. And as we walked home under that soft pink sky, I thought, maybe justice isn't something you win in court. Maybe justice is simply this: the courage to stay warm in a world that sometimes forgets how to be.